Hello, and welcome to the podcast, It's a Matter of Life and Death, a podcast by Annie Anderson and the Energy Medicine Clinic, one where we look to support, align, guide, and empower conversations that are tricky, passionate, and emotional about life and death. Thanks for joining us. Good morning on this rainy Tuesday morning. How are you, Ty?
I'm good, thank you.
Welcome to the studio.
Yeah.
Very, very pleased to have you here this morning. And just wondering, have you ever done a podcast before?
Nope, this is the first.
First one. Okay, I'll be gentle with you.
Okay.
We just basically have conversations. Sometimes they're about life, sometimes they're about death, sometimes they're super emotional, sometimes they're passionate. And just to be able to open dialogue for people who don't normally have a platform or a comfortable space with which to have these tricky conversations. Because let's face it, one of the biggest things that causes problems in relationships is lack of communication.
Yeah, in everything.
In every aspect of life. Isn't that you'd agree?
100%, yeah.
Yeah. So let's just dive right in. So I don't know if I've ever actually met you prior to knowing you in this capacity now. You know, you're coming from a background of law enforcement. I've come from a background of first responders on the ambulance. And I was thinking about this the other day, and I wonder if our paths ever crossed on a call, and I just don't remember.
Yeah, I was thinking about that today, and I'm assuming we did.
I would assume so. You know, it's a fairly small town that we're in, but clearly everything must have gone well.
It must have. Oh, I'm sure there was calls. We started sitting down and telling stories, I'm sure.
Would find a couple of cross points.
We would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the biggest thing on your mind these days? Tell me a little bit about how you got to be sitting in front of me right now.
Yeah.
What's your journey been like?
My journey's been about 29 months. Lots of growth, I think, is what it was. I kind of hit a point where I couldn't feel anymore, and it was just time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Time to get to healing, or else
taking care of you.
Yeah, taking care of me and my family, and wanting to feel.
Yeah.
I was numb at that point. So
yeah, you've probably had quite a bit of things over the years that you've been carrying.
Oh yeah, lots of injuries, mental and physical injuries from the job and life, right?
Yep.
Nothing happens in a vacuum with
No.
this. They want it to, but it doesn't happen that way. So yeah, there was a lot of factors. I think about it. It wasn't just one thing.
Death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah, it was for me. I was, as most of us were with COVID, I was isolated. So that wasn't optimal.
No.
For my personality, and with my injuries, it wasn't. So yeah, I come out of that, and it was just, it was kind of time. I was ready.
How long had you been policing prior to that?
Law enforcement total would be, I think, 29 years this spring.
Now, you say total, like there's been a couple of different chapters in there for you.
Yeah, there has. I started off in wildlife enforcement.
Okay.
Started off in the parks as the park ranger, and then
as the fish cop, as they say.
Yeah, I was a fish cop, and then back then there just wasn't any jobs, so I had to make a decision, and for the family, so we moved to policing. So I did 7.5 years in Moose Jaw, and then I've been here ever since in Medicine Hat. So
okay,
that's kind of my journey. And then I did, when I was a conservation officer, fish and wildlife officer, there was no work for us, so we'd kind of do 4 or 5 months, and then so I went and I got my EMT certificate, so I did a bit of your work, I guess, and most of it was on a ski hill, but
that's okay.
It was
emergencies happen everywhere.
Yeah, and it was
I needed the medic on the ski hill once years ago when I ripped out my knee.
Yeah,
so very valuable place to have somebody to help.
Not many medical calls, but there was a ton of trauma calls.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had that experience as well too. So, yeah, that's kind of my journey to now, and it's been a long time. Yeah. Time went fast.
So 29 months ago, would that be like July, August-ish of 21?
It was December of 2020, I think.
Yeah.
Into 2021. I think it was about then. So that's kind of when I really started to, look at it and go through the processes I've had to get to here. So,
were you aware that there was a challenge or a breakdown?
Oh yeah. I could feel it. I was definitely at a point where it was time to do something, or else I was going to get, I don't know what the end result was at that time, right? Like,
point of no return.
I was at the point of no return. Yeah, I was. I just, when you can't feel anymore, it's a scary place to be. It's a dark place.
Yeah.
So,
had your family or friends given you any feedback along the way of, little signs that they had noticed that maybe you took in but didn't really want to acknowledge, or was there no feedback from anybody prior to you realizing?
It's my wife gave me feedback. Yeah, there was some feedback. There was like, it's enough's enough, right? Of how I was.
Right.
The signs for me were hard because I've been decades. I've lived with a lot of this for decades and decades and decades. So I just knew that I didn't want that anymore too. So yeah, there was definitely some feedback.
That's a nice way to put it.
Yeah, I'll give her that. She gave me some definite feedback that this was enough. So, and I could see in my behaviors that I wasn't right. And I've had some physical injuries, so the chronic pain was cranked to that maximum too. So my body was giving me a lot of feedback that.
It's amazing how draining pain can be.
It's incredible.
Like, not even taking into account emotional, mental, spiritual pain, but physical pain unto itself is so draining. And then you add other injuries to that, and wow, that's heavy.
Yeah, and it's a cultural thing, I think, too. I didn't really understand until the last 2 years here that, like, your body and your mind are connected. We always separated that, and yeah, I was in a lot of chronic pain. And
were they on the job injuries or outside of?
Yeah, I have some on the job injuries, 2 pretty good ones, and then just the cumulative being on the front lines injuries, right? Like the death by 1,000 cuts injuries and and when you don't deal with that stuff, it just keeps adding up and adding up and adding up.
Did you find when you were off, I presume you were off work for some of these injuries for a time.
Yeah.
Did you find that when you were off work, there was a catch-up of all of the mental stuff that was present that you couldn't suppress necessarily because you were forced to be physically still? Because I know that sometimes being busy is a great way to defer and deflect pain.
Yeah. Yeah, me and isolation weren't good because then I couldn't keep it away anymore, right? I had to face the dragons that were chasing me, so... Yeah, like I was injured in 2003. I had a pretty good head injury, and I was pretty sick, but I was off. That was the first time. And yeah, I had to, like, I did some things to get myself back to work that I probably shouldn't have, but I had to get back. Because then it's easy to deal with the stuff out there. It's the stuff inside, right? So when you just keep numbing that, I guess, is the word. So yeah, isolation. But I think I've seen it, because I've been around lots of our, first responders, public safety people, and isolation is horrible. Yeah. But it's what happens when we get injured. We get isolated.
Well, it's amazing how many people don't reach out when you're off work because out of sight, out of mind. They're used to seeing you on shift, and then you're not there, and you get forgotten about.
Yeah, there's that for sure. And I've said to lots of people, I think too sometimes they won't reach out to you too because you become a mirror. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes, right? They see you and they see you took the step, and they don't want to see themselves in you.
Yes.
So I don't get I'm better now. I used to get really upset when I was off and people wouldn't reach out to me, and then I kind of flipped that script and said, you know what? I think sometimes I'm a mirror.
Yeah.
That they don't want to see, right?
And it's too big of a...
Yeah, it's too big of a thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But yeah, isolation is it's a horrible thing. It's a horrible thing. But that's what happens. We lose our tribes, right? And we lose that tribe, and then
without that support system.
Yeah, and then not knowing what's going to come next, and not feeling supported and stuff. And
if you're in this hyper alert state, this hyper vigilance, everything's a threat, and you don't have your peeps.
Yeah, we get that beautiful habit, right? And you got to learn to deal with that, and you lose your empathy. I lost my empathy. And so that's when a big thing too, the last 2 years, is getting that empathy back for humanity and everybody else. And makes a big difference.
Yes.
Because you lose it.
What was the biggest indicator that you had lost it? You just were a robot?
Yeah. Just not feeling when I know a normal human would be feeling, right?
Right.
And you get that distorted sense of, I don't know what it is, like on certain topics. You talked about death. Like, I've experienced a lot of death in my life, both on and off duty. And yeah, you just get a distorted sense of what that is.
And what's appropriate and
yeah.
what's insensitive.
Yeah, you get super insensitive.
Especially if there's people around you that aren't from this world. And you don't realize necessarily what you've said or the way you've delivered it until you see their face. And that's like, oh, right. Normal people don't talk like this.
Yeah, and then you get into situations too, right, where people will tell you things and you're like, are you kidding me right now? Like, you're upset about this? I don't even know what you're talking about.
Get some perspective.
Yeah, like get some, suck it up, right? We come from the suck it up culture. And it's
yeah.
It doesn't work.
No.
So yeah, it's been a journey of opening almost for me. So yeah, it's been good. It'll always be there, right?
Yes.
It's never over, and it's hard work. It's really hard work, and I think that's why. Yeah, it's tough to look in the mirror.
How long were you sidelined with your brain injury?
Oh, not long enough.
Oh.
I ended up. It was kind of a progression thing. I ended up in a merge, and then those are the days when the concussion stuff was just kind of starting. So I think I was told, like, were you knocked out? I said, no. They didn't look in my eyes, nothing. Just sent me back on the street. So I went in there till my brain finally got swollen enough. And then 2 to 3 weeks later, I crashed and I was rushed into Regina at the time. Yeah, and I seen a neurologist. They said, yeah, your brain's really swollen. Here's some drugs, go home. So I did. Yeah. And then I didn't want to be at home anymore, so I kind of talked to the doctor and they let me go back. So I think I missed 2 weeks, maybe.
Oh, not much.
No, and then I think that was like it happened in September. I think I got back in probably November. And then I went at it, and then in July I crashed again real bad. And then I was off for an extended period of time.
Yeah.
Till I got into the brain injury clinic and did that stuff. But yeah, I didn't take the time of the processing. And that was the first time I was officially diagnosed with PTSD too. So I didn't accept that.
Right.
Like that.
Who wants to?
And it was weird because a lot of the medical staff, like my doctors, said PTSD was there, but head injury PTSD, like the post-concussive syndromes, PTSD symptoms are so similar.
Yep.
So I just said, let's go.
Yeah.
So I went back. So, and then, yeah, there wasn't really much time. The second time I went off, I was pretty sick. I think now looking back, it was a toxic mix of both, probably. And then, yeah, I just kind of went back, and they put me on some medication, and of course I went cold turkey off it. I would never suggest that.
I would not recommend that for most things either.
Ever, yeah. I think they had me on amitriptyline at the end, and I just said,
tricyclic.
Yeah, and I'm like, I'm good. No, that wasn't smart. So, yeah, so then I still have symptoms today from that injury, for sure.
And do you think things would have been different if you had been cared for or cared for yourself differently?
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
But that just
hindsight's always 20/20 though.
Yeah, and I mean, there's still stigma around mental health in our business now. Back then, I was facing a double-edged sword because you can't see my brain swollen in my head. I look normal. I'm acting normal.
Yes.
And you can't see the PTSD. The guys closest to me could, but we didn't have words for it. Yeah. No language. So it was like, I just...
And who wants to admit that they're broken when they're the person that is like the 911? They're the one that is there to do the rescuing, the saving, the safety, all of that piece. And if you're broken, does there come a stigma that you're not to be trusted?
Yeah, 100% there's. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's changed for sure. We're still not there yet.
Well, it's interesting. 2 years, no, where did I come up with that number? I don't even know. Oh, for 2 years, that's where it was. For 2 years, I trained paramedics across Southern Alberta through the Department of National Defense's Road to Mental Readiness program.
Yeah, so did I.
Did you?
Yeah.
Ha, another touch point.
Yeah.
And I always thought I understood the one little section they had. There was a section they had there about Bob, who was off work and he was working on his motorbike in his garage. And you drive by and you see Bob and you think, he's working on his motorbike. He's on paid sick leave and he's working on his motorbike. How possibly could he be injured? Yeah. And they talked about in that program how Bob might look fine on the outside, but really Bob is scrambled on the inside emotionally and to some degree physically. It's just not visible. And I honestly, when I look back, I really thought that I understood that piece that I was teaching and had no idea actually how that would be to be Bob until I went off.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I that's one of the biggest, I don't have any regrets, but I said it to lots of guys since I've been off this time. That's one of my biggest things that I say to other guys. I wish I'd have been more empathetic to guys. I always was pretty empathetic, but I'd let the cultural rhetoric kind of speak a lot of times.
Yep.
And I wouldn't think I don't know, what's their childhood like? What did they bring here that brought it? Maybe I don't agree with their work ethic, but I don't know what brought them to this point.
Yeah.
I'm making assumptions.
Yeah.
Right?
What was their story prior to this?
Yeah. Because we still get bent out of shape, right? Guy goes off, and then another guy sees him in a grocery store, and they're like, what's he doing?
He's buying groceries. He needs to eat.
And he has a mental health injury. We can't have him isolating.
Yeah.
It's education, too. Right?
Yeah. There needs to be even more of that.
Yeah, huge. So that's a big thing, because we don't think, why is he going on vacation? Because he needs that's part of the mental health injury.
You need
right?
vacation too. Everybody
Yeah,
needs it, whether
right?
you're off or on.
Yeah, so it's that huge empathy piece for each other to understand that. Because then that feeds back into what we were talking about before, that isolation, right?
Yep.
Everyone's watching me. It's hard enough to go out. I still struggle with what the narrative is for me.
Yep.
I ran into guys you haven't seen in a couple of years, and they ask you, well, how are you doing?
Yep.
What are you doing? I don't know, right?
Yep.
Is this the person I want to explain the story to?
Do I want to trust them?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it safe?
Is it safe, right?
Are they going to go back to the coffee table at the shop and say, oh, I just ran into so-and-so, and oh my gosh, you should have seen them, and this is what they looked like, and this is what we talked about, and man, and then just totally cut you down.
Yeah, or wow, they looked healthy. I don't know why they're off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it becomes that push and pull, how much you share and how much you don't, and what you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
And yeah, I remember that story. It was interesting because when I did R2MR, I look back now, I'm not sure how I did it because I wasn't healed myself.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of just gripping and going to that course, but
yep.
It was a start. I mean, it started some conversations for sure, and we need more of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the culture needs more of it, for sure. Yeah.
So what was now you don't have to share clearly, but what was the tipping point? What was the impetus for you to really value your health and yourself so that you could decide to put yourself ahead of these things and give yourself the love and the care and the support and the healing that you deserve? How did you know you were ready for that?
Well, I don't think I knew I was ready. But yeah, if you'd asked me if I was ready for all this, I'd have said no. But I don't know. I think it was just, like I said, my wife had some things to say. And I just knew I was deteriorating.
Yeah.
And I've seen others. A big thing too, I was getting, longer in my career. Mm-hmm. And I've seen a lot of the guys leaving and running into major health issues because, the closet hadn't been clean.
Yeah. And their body was paying the price.
Yeah. The body pays the price.
Yeah.
PTSD just isn't about your brain.
Yep.
So I was seeing that, and I'm like, I don't want that. I don't want to be that guy. Yeah, I don't want to be 2 years out and have the heart attack or, that. So there was just a lot of factors.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know if there was like one particular point that I said, that's enough. And then just some things like Wounded Warriors came up for me at that time. And I'm like, hey man, that looks good.
Tell me about that program. I heard about it long after I left working on the ambulance. And I wonder, if I had heard about it before, would that have done something one way or the other? I'm sure it would have done something one way or the other, but I don't know really anything about it.
Yeah, so it's a nonprofit, Wounded Warriors. It's right across Canada. So I came across it from one of the other guys. I was lucky because it was in Cochrane, so it's free. Like I paid my gas or whatever to get there, and it's in like north of Cochrane, up in the foothills. It's beautiful, and they obviously screen you to get in. You talk to their doctors and kind of go through it, but the first, you just apply online. You go on their website, Wounded Warriors, and they got a pretty long waiting list.
Okay.
But yeah, it's so I think the first is 3 days, 4 nights. I think it was. The first week was really good for me because it taught me the language of PTSD. I didn't know a language, and that's a big thing about my journey too. I've had to learn the language of all this.
Yes.
I didn't have a language. It's like being in a foreign country. I couldn't
communicate.
Didn't know what was going on. So that first week's a lot about like window tolerance.
Yeah.
I didn't know what that was.
Yeah.
Well, I had fallen out of the window. I didn't know I was out of the window.
The window was broken.
Yeah, the window was broken. I kept falling out the bottom, or I would fly out the top. More often I was out. So just talking about that and just learning the language of what was going on. Probably the first time I learned the word safe. I didn't know what that was. Mm-hmm. Like I had safety in an operational context, but internal safety, I had no idea what that was. Right, so we talked about that a lot. There's so much, and just the environment, right? Like we talked a lot before I went to Wounded Warriors about putting me in like an inpatient program, and I'm like, I'm not leaving.
Yeah.
Like, no way, this is. But then I went there, and I was by myself and in that environment, and I'm like, wow, this is, the noise has stopped, right? I can look at myself. And the other thing that's great about Wounded Warriors, but it's hard, is it's all in group.
Right.
It's all group.
The people resist group.
Oh.
It's very vulnerable, and it's so powerful.
And it's so for public safety first responders, it's so necessary because we get our tribe back.
Yes.
We're fighting to get our tribe back, but we won't take the step to do it.
Yes.
And it was just, so it's all in group for 4 days, and the psychologist there, the first time they usually have a peer support person there, but something happened in my first one, it didn't. But the doctors are amazing, like the wizards of group. Like a lot of when I do group here, help facilitate it, it all comes from them, how they did it.
Yeah.
And the food's amazing.
Oh,
it's it's 5-star food.
Yes.
I'm very I'm a nature guy, so we're right on the river there. And it was just a lot of me learning the language of what was going on with me. So then I went through that week, and then I was lucky 2 weeks later I did the second portion. And the second portion is you take, and that was the other thing about the first week too, I actually wrote out a trauma timeline. Never done that before. And for me, one of the barriers to my healing at the time was I'd always compare. Comparison's a killer, right?
Yes.
So I'd say, like, why am I feeling like this when this guy did this? Or this person went through that? And then I did my trauma timeline, and the doctor's like, wow, like,
there's a lot here.
Holy smokes. So then I was able to see, okay, I see it now, right? So, and just I was with the first time I was with a lot of older military people, and that really helped me too, because I did see, okay, I got to deal with this now. I can't wait 10 more years.
Yeah.
So they kind of do that the first time, and then the second time, off your trauma timeline, you pick an incident, and then you got to write a story for 5 days.
Oh.
Yeah. So then you write the first day is kind of more just reviewing what you learned the first time, and then day 2 you write the intro, and then you got to say it in front of everybody.
So lots of exposure therapy.
Oh man. Yeah. But you're supported in it.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, you're supported in it, and they're just so that really helped get an incident off me.
Well, it's interesting. As soon as you said that, I thought, oh, I know what mine would be.
Yeah.
Like, I know what mine would be.
Yeah, and you really unpack it. like you start, it's, you know, like you really get to the weeds of why this is a thing, right? And there was things that come up that week that I had buried, gone, about that incident. So yeah, and then just learning how to, I think that's where I really started to learn how to regulate my body.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I didn't know what that was either. We just, you know, I just get the shakes.
Yeah.
Right? We just get the shakes, ride it out, get exhausted, carry on.
Yep.
You know.
Next.
Yeah, next. So I really learned to start getting in tune with my body. But yeah, it's a wonderful program. I can't say enough about it. I've recommended it a lot.
Why would somebody like WCB not support that as an initial first step, do you think? Because that was never even presented as an option that I've...
Yeah, so this had nothing to do with WCB. This was on my own.
But why wouldn't they support this?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't understand that either.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
because it's not so far out of mainstream therapy when it's run by psychologists and there's science behind what they're doing.
Yeah, and they're a top-notch organization. I mean, I can't say enough about their contribution to me, and how it was there. It was like, yeah, it was so supportive. It was amazing, and it's just so powerful to be around other people that are going through similar things and watching them, you know, the courage and the, you know, and I would say it again, like we need to do a group again for first responder. It's just hard. It's hard getting them to the door because they don't understand it.
Yeah. And there's I know for me, and I'm sure for others, there's this fear that once you open that door, you're never going to be able to close it.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Because there's just too many things that have to come out.
Yeah, that's the, I was thinking about that today too, you know, like you don't, when you start your healing journey, you don't just get to put on one Band-Aid.
Yeah.
Right? It once you start healing and heal your brain, then all the other stuff comes up.
Yeah.
And that's the fun house of it. But it's the healing part of it too, right? You learn so much about yourself. Because it's hard work. I say that, you know, people always want the magic bullet, but this is hard work, but it's worth it.
Yes.
Right? It's worth getting to the place where you're healthy again.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it was, Wounded Warriors, I can't say enough about them. And I guess there was no cost, so that's why the WCB thing never came up. But it's a medical model. Yeah. They go off or they don't go off.
Who funds it then? Just donation?
Yeah, there's lots of donations for them. I don't quite know how that works for them, but yeah, they're countrywide. So out here, it's either Cochrane or Souk, BC.
Yeah.
But they fly people from all over the place at their cost. Like it's not, I paid for my gas, obviously. Right. But yeah, we had people from as far as Ontario with me.
Wow.
And Winnipeg and BC and all over the place, right? So yeah, and it's just, there's something about that space too. Mm-hmm. It's a very healing space.
It's out by Ghost River, isn't it?
It's right on the Ghost. Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, that was a big step. Big step for me, that one. So, yeah.
What would you say were some of the other things that were helpful to you? For people, like if there's a wait list or they just can't, for whatever reason, get themselves to that program, what would be some of the other things that you would say would be helpful in either recognizing, like what are the signs and symptoms to look out for, and what are the things that you can do for healing?
It's a tough
question. Or
question.
Avoid.
Yeah, it's a tough question. Peer support's huge. I mean, we've done informal peer support.
Yeah, our whole careers.
Since these careers were invented.
Yeah.
Maybe not in the most positive ways all the time, but we always had that. Peer support's so huge because you can see that someone on the other side, or they've walked it. Yeah. You know, it's safe.
Yeah.
Safety is...
No judgment.
No judgment. I think we need a stopgap right now. Something's not working with the system. There's not enough. It's broken. Yeah. Yeah. There's no other way to say it nicely. The whole system and the organizations are a little bit broken, but we need each other still.
Well, it's interesting because sometimes the prescription that's given is exercise. Let's get the stress out of your body with exercise. However, I know that for me, that exercise causes a increase in heart rate, increase in breathing, which is a very similar feeling when you're in that acute stress state with the PTSD. And to avoid that at all costs is something that I've done.
Yeah, I'm pretty lucky. It's always been a big part of my healing process. That's when I was hurt in 2011, back and hip injuries. I couldn't work out.
Yeah.
That was a spiral.
Yeah.
For me, not walking wasn't cool,
Yeah.
but not working out was worse for me. But I've also seen it. Anything can be an addiction, and I've seen guys go to like, why I'm coming in at 6:30 and working out, or earlier before shift. Well, I got night shift guys still in there.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you in here? Why aren't you at home?
Mm-hmm.
So it can turn the other way on them too. Where,
maladaptive.
Yeah, if I pound my body, I don't got to feel.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just it's such a healthy balance. It goes back to, and I don't know how you guys taught R2R, but I was big on, we had a peer support team built, and I always said to the guys, you don't got to come to one of the peer support team. I just need to know you got somebody.
Yeah.
Right. And that's probably where I think we've gotten away from a lot.
Well, it was interesting because when the peer support team started here in Medicine Hat, it changed considerably over the years that I was on it.
Yeah.
And I look back now and I can see how it could have been done better.
Yes.
But, to some amount of credit, it at least was being tried.
Yeah. And I'm going to keep preaching these group, like, we're a small town. I know guys get into groups with each other. It could be same organization, and maybe we have an old supervisor over, a consult or whatever. So there's dynamics there, but just come in and listen.
Yeah.
Like, you will find that common ground, and we just got to figure out a way to make it work, because that's the gateway. That was the gateway for me more than anything, is just getting rid of that comparison. Oh, okay, I have been through some things. I should be feeling this way, right? These are my injuries, right? You know, and that guy next to me, I have no idea, because there's a hierarchy.
Yeah.
There's a hierarchy of first responders. I seen it in the programs I was in, right? We know that, but then you see a guy that's done something else, and you're like, wow, I have an appreciation for that. I can empathize with that, And then you make your own tribe again, and then we have each other again.
Yep.
It's just like the street. Right?
Yep.
And that's what we lose when it's taken away, especially abruptly, and in retirement, we see it with the guys, right? So we need to bring those tribes back in a healthy way. Like I grew up in the area of. I don't think they drink as much as we. We grew up in that alcohol culture a little bit.
Yes.
Was it super healthy? No, but we were always together.
Beer and wings.
Yeah, and we were together.
It's
right?
normalizing, and
And we've seen that about 10 years ago start to decay, where there was, we can't get anyone out for functions anymore. We can't this, that, which in some ways was healthy because we sold our soul to the job. But these guys are probably a little bit smarter. But we lost that brotherhood, sisterhood thing, right? And I really see that as being for people that are injured or retired, they still need that, especially when you're in it decades and decades and decades.
Yeah, and COVID certainly didn't help with that.
No, it didn't help. No, it didn't. It didn't help, and we're seeing that, right? And I don't know. It's the group thing, and it's hard. It's hard to come into, and because for my profession, like sometimes we did have CISM, so there was CISM debriefs, but a lot
critical incident stress management for the layperson.
Yeah,
okay?
sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
Acronyms. A lot of our debriefs too were operational debriefs.
Yes.
And sometimes those can feel critical in some ways. So there's probably some of that kicked into that too, where I don't want to get in there and get criticized or, So it's just breaking down all those barriers. But that's Wounded Warriors taught me. And then I was in the Newley Institute in Calgary too not this fall, the fall before. And that was one of the best things there too. We had a group again.
Yeah.
Different.
Yeah.
But I was back with my people again, right? So, it's good. I would say that's because as you know, the resources are limited, and I appreciate there's more you have an app at work, or here's a pamphlet, but that doesn't always cut it. You can't, the horse won't go to the water and you can't lead them there. And we just won't.
You can't push a rope.
Yeah. And we seem to be the people we got to hit the wall and the parts got to go flying 600 feet before we stop. And so, yeah, it's interesting.
But speaking of like your wife and, to some degree, my husband and our families, our immediate family, our kids and, our parents and siblings and things like that. What about them?
They're forgotten.
Totally.
Yeah. That's another thing that needs to change. When we did our 2MR, we rolled it out to the spouses.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
they didn't do that with EMS.
We did that. It was well received from them. I took some flack.
I bet.
Yeah, but they're forgotten, totally forgotten about. And yeah, and even like, I don't want to go back and talk about, the insurance companies we have to deal with and stuff, but they're totally forgotten. Like, there's no counseling for them.
Mm-hmm.
It's not covered.
Mm-hmm.
I've been lucky because I've been able to bring my wife into some of my sessions and stuff, and some of the therapies I've done, we brought her in and stuff. And but yeah, there's no understanding for it. There's nothing for them.
And if your support structure isn't doing well, how then do you, like this? If the support is not doing well, how are you supported? It's this, feeding cycle of break this down, then that doesn't get better, and this doesn't, and it's this circle.
Yeah, it's a horrible, and then, yeah, I mean, look at the divorce rates.
Yeah.
And there's no stat for that, but our relationships break down.
Yeah.
It takes a toll on them. And, it's in a smaller, any community really, but in a smaller community, you're on 24 hours.
Yeah.
Even now, people still see me for what I used to do. They don't understand because some people just don't need to know, whatever.
Yeah.
But, I was always the policeman. I policed in small communities.
Yeah.
So that never gets turned off. And it never gets turned off for them either.
Yeah.
Right?
No.
Like, it never does.
Well, I get phone calls even now, all hours of the day, and I'm not saying don't call me, but I have this medical emergency. I have this question. I have this thing going on. What do I do? How do I handle this?
Yeah. I still get that too sometimes,
Yeah.
right? From friends.
Yeah.
Free legal advice. And
Yeah.
I'm like, so yeah, there's no turning it off either for them as well too.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Or driving by the accident now and thinking, okay, has anybody stopped? No, clearly nobody has stopped. I just witnessed this car crash. Morally, ethically, all that. I need to stop.
Yeah. You don't really need to stop, but you do.
Yeah.
Right. Or, it's being in the grocery store with your family and you see someone you just arrested like 8 hours before. And you have to be hypervigilant to make sure they're protected.
Yeah.
And they don't know why you're herding them like sheep away from out of the store. And, it's that stuff that they don't get that support for. And there's no, when we did do our 2MR with our cadets at that time, we did bring the spouses in at the start. And I don't think that's happening much anymore, but they need to know right from the start. And I know we're having trouble recruiting, but it just needs to be up front. They're going to change. I used to say that all the time. I don't know how popular it was, but it was just honest. You're going to see a change. There's no way you can't. And then the aftermath of it. For the retired guys and guys that are injured, my family lives through this too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I've had more than one, period of time where I'm just like a mess. I'm just a puddle.
Yeah.
And to have my family watch me like that, I know has hurt them.
And they don't until this last 2 years, I wasn't open about it. So they didn't the joke in my house, my older kids was, whose turn is it to wake dad up from a nap, right? Like that was always the,
Because how you woke up wasn't always pleasant.
Never. Yeah, I'd come out hard always, right? Like I'm jumpy, and so that we talk about that now. It's kind of a joke, but that was their life. Like, how do we get dad's having a nap? Whose turn is it to,
Take it.
Yeah, whose turn is it to see what he's gonna do now, right? And just for them, and they had to live that, right? So, on the outside it looks fine, but
Well, I know there was a book written, and I've never actually seen the book, but I've heard about it. And the concept of it is perfect. Why is Dad mad all the time?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure it's a book about a dad who tells his story about what it's like having PTSD and how the family can support him and themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple good books. I'm trying to remember that other book too. We used to give it out to all the cadets at one time. But it was kind of speaking about that, like why we come home and, you know, it's just typical in a first responder's house. Like, what do you want to do for supper? I don't know. You decide, right?
Yeah. I'm tired of making all the decisions
I've been
today.
making life and death decisions and fast, high-speed decisions for 12 hours. I come home, I don't want to do anything. Like, I don't want to make a decision. I'm decisioned out.
Yeah.
And so it's that education piece of them knowing, like, why does he come home like this? Why, you know? And then you deal with that years and years and years and years of that. It dissolves the family. It does. And then the injuries pile up.
Yeah.
Right? And then they have to deal with some of this sanctuary trauma and stuff that they're like us, like, oh, you know, I thought they'd have my back, but guess not. So what do we do now? And then dealing with the systems and the confusion of the systems and, you know, why aren't they taking care of you? I don't know.
Why do I feel disposable right now?
yeah, right? You know, so, yeah, there's so much that could be done for them too. And just more proactive stuff. Because I get asked all the time, like, what can we do? Well, I don't know, but it's got to start with the culture, right? It's got to start with our cultures, and it's not about the administrative staff or the guys who are in the, it's got to start, every individual's got to make a decision. Yeah. Am I going to be more empathetic to my brothers and sisters? How are we going to change this?
Yeah.
Because the truth of the matter is, when we go off, we don't come back.
No.
So why, you know, but no one asks why that is. And I think those questions that retention needs to be started. There's no reason I've healed physical injuries on the job. Why can't I heal mental health injuries on the job?
Because you're going back into the same environment that made you sick to start with.
Yes. Yeah.
I had somebody say to me once, I don't understand why this is bothering you. Like, you have trained for this. You've gone to school for this. And I said, I don't remember the part of school that talks about how to deal with the sound of the mother's scream when you're holding their dead child.
No, there's no. Yeah.
It's like expecting me to walk through water and not get wet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we do these things. You know, I've heard it said so many times over the decades. Like we see more in a day than some people do in a lifetime, right?
Yeah.
And we're expected to go from maybe the worst call we've ever seen to turn it around and to
take your kid to soccer.
Yeah, or go to the stolen garden gnome call, right? And be empathetic.
Yes. And
be like that person. Like, I hated it always, but yes, they pay their taxes too, right?
Yep.
I have to serve them too, but then they don't get me.
The best version of you.
No, they're not going to, because I just had to do something that was way outside the box, and I'm not here, right?
Yeah.
And it is part of the job. I hate the words. I didn't sign up for what happened to me, but I did sign up for that. Like, I understood that. Mm-hmm. But there just has to be better mechanisms in place to give people breaks. And I don't know how we do that. Mm-hmm. Because there's just not the manpower to do that. But
well, you were mentioning food before, how the value of like pure nutrition and good, wholesome, healthy, whole food.
Yeah.
Versus I am eating while I'm, navigating at 80 miles an hour.
Yes.
And I'm choking back food or food-like substance.
Yeah, or something.
And it's not healthy for me, and it's been reheated 3 or 4 times sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's not good for your body or your mental health.
And decades of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, then the stomach issues start, and now I know about my nervous system and the vagal nerve. Like, ours are fried.
Don't even factor in coffee.
Well, yeah, we just drink that like
coffee
water.
And sugar.
Yeah, the coffee, the sugar, the
energy drinks.
The energy drinks, whatever we can get to just keep us going. And then it becomes a death by 1,000 cuts over decades of it. It's I don't know. I don't know where. It's not really my problem, I guess, in a lot of ways, but there's an educational piece to it, right? So, yeah, I don't know what the answer is, but
how about the people that you were close to, like legit good friends with,
yeah,
that are still doing the job? How has that affected your relationship now that you're out?
it has. Yeah, it has quite a bit. It depends who they are and what they are.
And how close you thought they were, and how close you actually are.
Yeah, it depends on who it is too. I got good friends in Moose Jaw still. We had a different dynamic there. We were closer, I think, but we're still the same, some of us. But other guys, I'm not, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
When you, it's hard to say, but when you go through these things like I did, because of whatever reasons they have, you kind of find out who your friends are.
Yeah.
And you make new friends. Yeah, I found guys that maybe I wasn't the closest to, that now I'm close to because we were walking a similar path. So it really depends.
Yeah.
On a person to person, I think. I've had some very interesting conversations with some people too that I never expected would come and talk to me.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, it's been interesting that way because I was so. That was one of my biggest hurdles, was that isolation, and I, I look at my phone now and I'm like, oh yeah, I fixed that. Like, and sometimes I'm like, stop talking to me, right? Like, so yeah, I've almost like gained another different sphere of humans almost around me in a lot of ways that I've gained through being through Wounded Warriors and then going through Newly. I've gained
circle.
I've gained another, tribe of humans, and that empathy thing made a big difference for me. I'm able to probably connect to some of the people I worked with before on a different level now, and be able to understand and see what I was seeing in them all along, but now understand it on a different level.
I had a guest for another podcast that I recorded, and something she said was so powerful. Completely different situation, but the message was still so powerful. She says she was talking about an abuser, and she said, "How hungry must your heart have been to wanted to have devoured mine?"
Yeah.
And I think, wow, the amount of empathy and compassion she had for someone who hurt her was massive.
Yeah.
And when I think about the peers that have had that, similar traumatic relationship with you, where they haven't been kind, they haven't been understanding, how broken are they that they are just on the offensive in order to protect themselves?
Yeah, and it in my journey too, you learn about the ego quite a bit too.
Yeah.
We're very ego-based occupations. We have to be.
Yeah.
So a lot of it, that feeds into it too, right?
Yeah.
And you see, I said it, I can't remember who I said it to, but I always say it. It also, and my wife has to remind me a lot, but you don't see the picture till you're out of the picture either.
Yeah.
So it's perspective too. And I got to remind myself of that all the time. It's perspective. I'm not in that picture anymore. Because when I was in the picture, I did things that I wasn't as empathetic and stuff, but I was able, now I'm out of that picture, and I'm able to look in and go, oh.
If you think back to your last shift, did you know it was your last shift when it was your last shift?
That's a little complicated for me because I was, I was on a modified duty job.
Okay.
When I went out this time, but I'm trying to think back to that last shift. I know one of the last shifts I had, I knew I was in trouble,
right? Because
of the physical pain.
Right.
I was making mistakes, and I knew, I just had a gut feeling it wasn't going to end well. But and I kind of been through it before, so I kind of knew. I distinctly remember the call.
Yeah.
Where I knew I was in trouble.
Yeah.
Because I was in so much pain I couldn't think anymore, and I was making mistakes.
Yeah.
And I was in a position where I couldn't make mistakes.
Right. No, of course.
So I knew then, and I don't know if that was the last shift. It was pretty close. I think it was. I knew I just couldn't suck this up anymore. I was in too much pain, and I couldn't really walk real well.
Yeah.
And I was masking that, so it was all coming apart. This last time when I went out, with whatever happened, when I walked out, there was intuition in me said, I'll never walk back in.
Yeah.
I don't know what that was, because it wasn't, the situation at that time wasn't pointing that way.
Yeah.
I just knew that was it. So so that
I asked because of the grief portion.
Yeah, I knew where you were going with
that.
That's another thing I've learned about is grief.
Yeah,
it's a dying, right? There's death in it. Because
there's death of a career, there's death of a future, there's seeing it coming, there's not knowing it's coming, thinking it's coming, not being sure if it's coming, and then when it actually is real, it's like, what would have been better? To just like have that instantaneous, okay, whoop, this is it, you're done? Or the pre-grieving wondering, is this going to be my last shift? Is this going to be the one that I can handle or not?
Yeah, I don't know what's better. I think we're all different. That was one of my huge, I don't know what I'd call it, barriers, excuses. When I started this journey to heal was I didn't want to lose myself.
Yeah.
I used that.
Well, it's part of your identity.
Yeah, and I didn't, and the pieces of me that I didn't want to lose were what has saved me all these years, right? So I'm like, I don't want to lose that. And I didn't.
Yep.
I just found a place for it. I found the box for it. But yeah, grief's a huge thing, and we're surrounded by death. I've been surrounded by death from an early age, and I've been on the job, off the job, and that's all. Like, to me, that was the big deaths. Like, I can handle it, right? But you don't think about those small things. Like when I lost it, the first time when I knew I couldn't be operational, the first time, that was a huge blow to me.
Yep.
I didn't want it to end this fast, right?
Yep.
So yeah, you deal with that, and you deal with it in the healing process all the time. Like you figure out, you're like, uh-oh,
yep.
that part of me doesn't work anymore. It needs to take a back seat. That's death. And we face, and I know for myself, we face death of ourselves. Like I was never, I didn't know what the word was, but I was probably been passively suicidal for a long time. Didn't know what that was. It wasn't that I had a plan, I was going to go do something, but I just get into that darkness where I'd be, okay, I just want to go to bed, close my eyes, and I'm good. Like
if this is it.
Yeah, I'm good.
I've
lived hard for this many years. I'm good. And that's facing death, right? And what that means, and is this it? Is that, so yeah, I actually got very lucky when I was in Newly. I'd never had a grief counselor in my life. And I just got lucky and got one there.
Yeah.
And man, that made a difference for me because I was able to process a lot of it. Right?
Wow. It was so interesting because I've had two very amazing psychologists that I've worked with over the last 2.5 years. And one of them said, I think you need to read this book. And it was the Grief Handbook.
Yeah.
And I remember, I don't know, maybe 40 or 50 pages into this book, I took a picture of it, of the page, and I sent it to several people. And I said, oh my God, I'm grieving.
Yeah.
I had no idea. And I sent it to them and I said, does this make sense to you? And they both went, that's me also.
Yeah.
And it was like this massive light bulb. And I don't know how many months I was into it, like maybe almost a year, I would imagine, of my therapy. And I had no idea how much grief and PTSD overlap and mirror each other, and how one could be missed so easily.
Yeah, because we deal with grief so much, and it's small. Like sometimes it's that, and I think it was in our R2MR they talked about it, and it was hard to talk about at the time, but I think we talked about like those small deaths in those, like you get moved from one unit to another.
Yes, change partner.
Yeah, we change partners. We're just told.
Yep.
Like you get the Friday email at 4:00, starting Monday.
Yep.
Whether you like it or not,
this is what's happening.
Yeah. And you adapt and overcome to it. But yeah, it's those small, it's that grief. It builds up, and like you just grieving your career. And I think that's what happens in retirement.
I imagine.
Like you, all of a sudden, you're just...
your rhythms, your patterns, your routines, your lifestyle, your interactions are all completely different.
Well, it just depends. Like I could detach from the job at times. Being in these small communities, I couldn't as much, but I wasn't totally detached. Like I've seen some guys, but some guys really buy into it.
Yep.
For years and years and years, that becomes so much your identity, and nobody that gets into that job can say it isn't part of your identity.
Yeah.
Right? You can't. It's unavoidable.
Some people get it tattooed on them.
Well, I don't, but yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, right. So, so then you get into that grieving process. When you're retired, you have no more supports. There's no insurance. There's no, you have your benefits, but,
Yeah.
and then your tribe's gone. And then what do I do now?
Yeah.
And now the closet starts opening.
Yeah. Knock, knock. Who's that?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
the
right?
trauma's back.
Yeah. The trauma's here, and it's here, and all these things. And, you start, and then you're isolated. Here we go again, right? You're isolated again. And now you just got yourself. And that's...
and your grief.
In the mirror, right? And you start thinking, well, maybe, did I sell myself out for this, or did I do this or that? And the grief for me was a huge thing, and not on the job, but personally for years of it. Having to learn how to deal with that, and the lost parts of myself and the gain parts of myself, and then what's that look like, and who am I?
Yeah.
Right? It's that who am I? And it's a lot of looking in the mirror. It's no fun.
Well, this last Christmas, just a few months ago, I was outside the Co-op liquor store. We're having a big Christmas party, fondue, that sort of thing. And I went and grabbed some beer and whatnot. And I was in the parking lot, and this woman walked up to me outside my van. And she said, "Are you a paramedic?" And I said, "Yes." I said, "Did I pick you up one time?" Like, I don't know. She says, "No, you helped my husband when he had a heart attack. You were amazing."
Yeah.
And I thought, I have been off the job for more than 2 years now.
Yeah.
And I don't recognize this woman. And how many years before that did I help her husband? And she recognized me.
Yeah, I know.
And I'm like, oh, wow. Like, clearly, in that moment of her, intense life experience with her husband nearly dying, or I don't even know. Did he die and we got him back? I don't know. Did I fly him to Calgary? I don't know. But it was so surreal, and trying to have to figure out, what was my role in that? What is my role now? They're so far apart from where they were.
Yeah.
And the grief that comes from not being that person for someone again.
Yeah.
But finding value in something else that's just as important.
Yeah, and just and honoring yourself.
Yeah.
For that. You made a difference. Because that's, for the members, like me, that go out with injuries and don't get to end it on our own terms.
Yeah.
There's a lot of bitterness and grief with that. And it took me a while to not throw myself out, right? Everything needs to go on. Like, that was my reaction, right? And that's my wife that stopped me. But but then you get those, I'm still in the community, and you get that. And you can say, okay. That's what it was about. It wasn't about the end. It was about how I served.
Yeah.
Right?
And those moments where I did make a difference.
Yeah. And like that's what, another big thing, speaking of Wounded Warriors, that's probably the first time I felt I had someone say that to me, thanking me for my service and listening to my story, and I guess validating, almost like, this is like, wow. Right. So, and I get that still. I just had it happen last week. I helped someone, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago or 3 years ago with something, and they thanked me for it. And I don't remember.
Yeah.
I don't remember being with them. So that's the gift of it. And that's what you got to, I had to come to terms with the wounds and see that they were badges of honor. They weren't these injuries that I have.
They weren't weaknesses.
Yeah, they weren't weaknesses, right? Because that's, there's a huge barrier to care. It's and now that I've been through it, I say it all the time to people, but this is probably the hardest thing I've ever done.
Yep.
So, what looked like weakness wasn't.
Yep.
It was strength to do it. And that's what I tell people that come into Synergy here, or I'm in a whatever program, and I'm like, you cross the threshold. Like, that's the courageous move, right? And that's the biggest. Like, that takes more guts than anything I ever did out there, really. And so
I had a friend of mine who had been off with PTSD for probably a year or so, maybe even a bit longer. I forget exactly how long their journey was. But I remember sitting there, and I remember exactly where I was. I was in my bathroom, and I was sitting on the edge of my bathtub just talking on the phone. And she said to me, "So you're starting your therapy, you're starting your treatment?" I said, "Yeah." And she said, "This is going to be incredibly hard, much harder than you realize." And I went, "Yeah, sure, whatever." Like, come on. No, I'm good. This is going to be easy. I can get through this. And oh my God, I don't remember how many times I called her up and said, I can't say it. I choose not to say it on the podcast, but there were some significant choice words for her about how right she was and how angry I was at her for being right.
Yes.
Because it's hard.
Yeah, it's I don't know how to describe it really, and it's different for everybody, because it's multi-dimensional. We're trying to heal in systems and stuff that want us to stay sick, and so it's hard. And then you got to look at the hardest thing is to look yourself in the mirror and say, apologize to my kids about, sometimes I wasn't present, and it worked for me at the time because I was at work all the time.
Yeah.
And I was going hard because that's what I was taught.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a hard journey. It's not a great selling point. You're about to do the hardest thing ever.
I was going to say, what do you say to people who ask you about, them considering a career like what you've been through?
Yeah, it's
because a lot of people say, would you do it over again if you had to do it, knowing what you know and knowing how hurt you've become? And I know what my answer is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've thought about that lots, and I was thinking about it on the way down because I knew you were going to ask me. Because everyone does, but I read a book. I think it was one of the hockey player's dad's books, so I always like to say the negative first and then bring up the positive. But, I mean, let's face it, if someone would have said to me in 1995, you're going to do this job, you're going to be injured 3 times, and every time you're going to be injured, the systems that you thought would have your back aren't going to have your back. I'd have said, I'm out, right?
Yeah.
I'm this.
Why would you do that?
Why? That doesn't make sense. So no, right? I wouldn't do it. If someone would have said that to me back then, I would have said no. Do I regret the injuries? Do I regret what I did out there? No, I'd do it all over again.
Yeah.
100 times over. I'd do it again. Just the things I learned. I wouldn't be in the place I am now.
You wouldn't be who you are.
No.
Yep.
And I wouldn't be able to, whatever this next phase looks like, I'm finding the skills I developed, my journey, the experience I had, they're all coming with me.
Yep.
I just had to find the right place for them. So I don't regret that. And I don't regret serving this community. This is a good community. I like it here. And I don't, that part of it, there's no regrets for me. The people I met, the things I got to do.
The intimate moments of raw vulnerability and human factor that people just don't get to experience any other way. Yeah,
and I mean, there's no, I don't know, outside the military what we do. It's the peak experiences. You can't test yourself in no other way than what we've done.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking that too on the way down. I'm I was that 2010-ish, I was on top of my game. I was
dialed in. I
was just dialed in. And there's no, you can't, that feeling, I don't know how to even describe that when you're dialed in.
Flow.
It's flow. It's a altered state of consciousness.
Yes.
It is. You're flowing, right? And there's nothing you can't handle.
Yeah.
And there's
no pun intended. You're bulletproof.
You are, and you're just at that point in your career where you know things well enough. You have enough confidence in yourself. And at that time, I was really highly trained tactfully. That's a terrible word. I don't know what that means, but so yeah, I don't have those regrets.
Yeah.
The only regret that would be is that, when I was hurt, I thought I would be taken care of, and I didn't learn the first time, didn't learn the second time, the third time. I had to step out.
Yeah.
Those are the things. That's the hard parts of it, and finding. But I would never ever take back serving the communities I did. I enjoyed every minute of it.
Yeah.
Would I do it differently? Yeah, but
you wouldn't be who you are now.
No, and it just, that's just how it is.
Yeah.
It's how it was, right? We just, it's how I was wired, and you're just out there. You do your job. You work as hard as you can. You probably self-sacrifice too much, but. That's
also maybe just part of your personality as a human. Yeah,
it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the long answer of that. It's not a simple answer.
No.
Right? I would never just if a young person came to me, I'd just ask them what's in your heart? If this is what you want.
What's your goal? What do you want out of this?
And if you if this is passion for you to serve, then go for it. But don't get into this for the salary.
No.
Because it's different now.
Yeah.
The salary is different than when I started.
Yeah.
So don't do it just, I've seen that where they've come in just, it's not.
No. And if you're going to come into it, know that, well, eyes wide open, full disclosure, there are going to be these times. And how can you set yourself up to succeed and be healthy in advance of those? Because it's not if, it's when.
Yeah, it is. I used to tell the cadets, I come from a rodeo background, it's like rodeo, and you're going to get hurt. It's just how bad and when. And it's kind of the same thing. You're going to get, because the things you brought to the job, they didn't go anywhere.
No.
And it'll test you.
Yeah.
It'll bring up similar scenarios. It'll test you. So
give you opportunities to heal those.
Yeah, and there's no magic, there's no magic bullet to weed people out from that. I don't know, I've never seen the stat, but from what I know from dealing with so many first responders is 85 to 90% of us have things from our past, our childhoods that we bring forward. That's why we do the job.
Yeah.
So we're setting ourselves up, right? We are. And so that factors in to it. So there just has to be things in place as we go down the road that we don't have necessarily right now. But it needs to become a priority. And, I do get tired of the excuse of, well, we don't have enough manpower. Well, but it's a cycle. Like if we keep losing people like we are, where
are you going to be?
Yeah, so you got
penny wise, pound foolish.
Yeah, so there has to be these, like, it's not an app. It's not like R2MAR kind of fizzled out. A program like that has to be every year. There has to be, in an ideal world, every year to 2 years, you have to take a break.
Yeah.
And you got to go to the doctor. You got to go to the psychologist.
Get a mental health checkup.
Everything. And if it's good, then give me your key card and you're done for a month.
Yeah.
You're just going to go chill out.
Yeah.
And we'll figure whatever that time bank looks like. Who cares?
Yeah.
And there's just it's not, we're better than we were, but the stigma's still there. I mean, it's still there. And I think, I don't know what'll change that, but.
Well, I feel like part of it comes from people like us sharing stories.
Yeah, 100%.
And I remember I went to the Brick. Well, I'll back up. I went to Home Depot and I went to Future Shop and I was trying to buy a stove. And I couldn't hold a thought of how to compare the stoves because my processing was just decimated.
Yeah.
And after literally 2 hours with the Future Shop guy sitting there and him having his little headset saying, yeah, no, sorry, I can't help you, to his colleague that was asking for something. I'm still with that same lady. I'm still with the same lady. And it took me, I don't know how many times of him saying this in his little headset before I went, oh my God, I've been here for 2 hours to try and buy a stove. Like, what is happening here?
Yeah. And
I then went and burnt my bridge at Home Depot talking to the girl there. And I finally said, yeah, there's clearly nothing here for me. Like, and she kind of looked at me like, thank goodness, like, leave. Like, you're making me crazy.
Yeah.
And I had to have a complete psychological appointment on how to figure out how to buy a stove.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until she suggested to me, how would it feel to be honest and vulnerable with the salesman? And I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
She says, how about you she says, how many places are left in town that you could go to buy a stove before you run out and have to go to another city? I said, well, I've got a couple. Yeah. So I literally went to the Brick and I did what she suggested. And the guy came over, hey, how are you? What do you, what can I help you with today? And I said, here's the deal. I have PTSD. My brain right now is fried. I'm stressed. I'm shut down. And I need a stove. My other stove caught fire. And I don't have the ability to figure out what stove to buy. These are the 5 things I need. This is my price bracket. And I need you to help me buy a stove.
Yeah.
And I took that step of vulnerability and just laid all the cards out on the table.
Yeah.
And then we had this amazing discussion about how he had fallen off a roof and broken like however many bones in his body. Yeah. And he understood PTSD.
Yeah.
Best sales experience I ever had. And so now I am more willing to say that to people to help them understand, why am I not getting this? Like, why don't I understand this simple question? Well, you're not using the language that I understand right now, and I don't speak your language, and so we're not going to be able to connect.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Language is so important. I've changed my language because I talk injuries a lot.
Yeah.
And I learned that from Wounded Warriors and from my own like learnings. And that makes a huge difference. And I think that's where it starts, is just people like us talking about it.
Yeah.
You won't hear me talk about you won't hear me say PTSD ever. Not much, because to me, it's a nervous system injury. It's a brain injury.
Yes.
And so there's no, to me, can you ever get over it? I don't know. I don't think I'll live with this forever. I have to do things every day.
Yeah, you adapt.
Yeah, I adapt. But yeah, I just talk about it as an injury, and I think if that language changes around it, like.
It's funny you say that.
It's just, it's just an injury. Like, it's a brain injury too. And that's what people forget. It's a brain injury. It biologically affects your head.
It changes you. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I used to be like, we talk about weakness, like I hated diagnosis, hated it because it's weakness.
Yeah.
You tell me I'm weak. Now I love diagnosis because I've got myself to a place where, okay, because I was able through all the therapy and the psychedelic medicine and the stuff I did without the therapy to differentiate between, okay, is this my head injury? Is this the PTSD? Is it the ADHD? I got to touch ADHD,
I can't relate to that at all.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and so it goes back to, you got to, like, I think it was Sun Tzu said, he's the art of war guy, right? Like, if you don't know yourself, then you'll get defeated by the enemy. And then if you know yourself, but you don't know the enemy, then you'll get defeated. You need to know yourself and you need to know the enemy. So you need to know these diagnoses.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the place I came to. Yeah, tell me what's wrong with me. And then I got that brain that I can start digging and looking like, oh, okay. And then that's where the breakthroughs come through, right? Like, why ain't I'm sleeping? Well, I got sleep apnea. Well, I don't look like I should have sleep, but I had sleep apnea. And then it came with 3 other sleep disorders. Well, when I finally figured that out, it changed the game.
Yep.
So don't be scared of those diagnoses, but we're scared of them because it speaks weakness.
Yeah.
And like it's
it speaks clarity and understanding.
Yeah.
And then empowerment. Because
really, like with PTSD, they call it a disorder, but really it's a defense. It's not a disorder; it's a defense because your body's just constantly trying to defend you.
Yeah.
And it's just not making a difference between if there's a threat or not a threat.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't talk. I've changed my language about things. I talk about nervous system injury a lot because it's what it is. Right, we have injuries. It's not.
Yeah.
It's no different than my back injury that I deal with every day. It's no different. You just can't see it, and so it's And
That's an excellent point.
Yeah, and now I can kind of tell. Like, that's another thing I did 2 years ago. I finally told 2 people that since I had my head injury in 2003, I get stabbing pains in my head. I never told anybody why, but is that part of? It's the head injury for sure, but is it? Some of it is I never knew what disassociation was. Like, I'm like a level 8 wizard at disassociation, but I didn't know what it was. Mm-hmm. So it's learning the language it's the healing. It's learning your healing language it's been so important to me because then I can normalize it.
Yes.
And then it was going back to like doing the trauma timeline and seeing, okay, I've lived through some stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Eliminate the shame.
Yeah, you get rid of the shame and and that's a huge step of, and that's got to change probably society-wise, but culturally too. Like, when a guy has PTSD or complex PTSD, which you can't really talk about complex PTSD to WCB, but if you have, because a lot of us have complex PTSD because it's 1,000 cuts. It's okay, right? And for the other people that look at a guy with complex PTSD or whatever it is, a mental health injury, they're going to be able to go rake their lawn.
Yeah.
They might be able to run their second business. But that's healing them, right?
Yes.
They're going to go to Mexico.
Yeah.
They have to, right? They have to carry on with it. They have to force themselves into the grocery store.
Yeah.
Right? And that's you don't see them with the knee brace on.
And you don't see them, this is the first day they've had a shower in a week.
Yeah, or you know what? They only slept 2 hours last night. Because that's a big thing, sleep too, right? So it's breaking that down, and that's what I try to do. I'm very open about my journey. If you want to ask me, I'm an open book. I'll talk about it because I have to. For the other people still in or the people suffering, and we just need more peer support that's honest, right? That they can come into a place like Synergy and see us and go, oh, and we know each other. We walk different. We carry ourselves different. We know, right? And you're like, oh,
I see you.
I see you. You're here. and you're not freaking out, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's okay to be here,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah, it's just I think that's it's changing that language around it, and it's not, because I always thought, for me, I'm a great PTSD denier, because I always, like, it was the Vietnam movie, right?
Yeah.
Because I know now that I don't flash back that way. I flash back more in my sleep, but I was getting flashbacks all the time, but I just didn't know what they were, because I seen.
Or intrusive thoughts. What is that?
Yeah, it's the same kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So, but I wasn't freaking out and yelling in the grocery store.
Yeah.
But a lot of us don't. We hold it in, right? Like, now that I'm better and I'm around I can see when guys their nervous system's starting to not like the environment they're in, and then they take agency, however that is. Whether that's, with us, it's anger a lot, right? They'll take agency by lashing out, pushing people away.
Yeah.
And I had to learn that, like, when I get angry, I just wanted to just throw the grenade, because then no matter how much damage I did, I got people away from me.
Yeah,
right?
they leave you alone.
Yeah, I got space, and I was able to take some agency back of how I was feeling. So, yeah, it's just conversations.
Yep. Well, I thank you for coming and talking about this.
You're
because
welcome.
It's these sorts of conversations in so many areas of everybody's life that just need to start.
Yeah, start the conversation and take the first step.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you very much.
We'll talk again, I'm sure.
We will.
Have an awesome, awesome next chapter of what comes for you.
I will.
I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Thank you.